Hi guys, Kelly here, and today I want to talk about my most recent reads. I have about five books I've finished and 2 that I am officially DNFing. So let's start off. I'm just going to quickly show you the ones that I've decided I'm not going to finish. And the reason for this is both of these books I started in February, and I have not picked them up since February. So I read them like for a few weeks in February, and I have not touched them once in, what is this, it's May now, so that's over 2 months. And so I've just decided I'm not going to. I have no interest to pick them back up, and there was a reason I put them down, so I'll talk about them real quick. The first one is A Book of American Martyrs by Joyce Carol Oates. I had wanted to read this book because Joyce Carol Oates is a prolific author. I wanted to give something of hers a try, and I picked this one because it's about a killing of an abortion doctor, and it's supposed to be about both sides of like the abortion issues. So I just thought it would be like interesting, since abortion is a big issue in America, that this would be an interesting kind of perspective of both sides. Well, I just kind of hate her writing, and I've heard that that's kind of how her writing is in a lot of it. It's very rambly, very kind of stream of consciousness, not really focused, and I just didn't like it. And I made it about a third of the way through, and I was reading this for about 2 weeks straight and really like focusing on it in February, and I put it down because I was thinking about DNFing it, and I thought, well, maybe I'll pick it back up, and it's been over 2 months. And other than to say I was going to try this for Tome Topple, I have not picked it back up, and I really have no interest because I just remember like kind of torturously going through it as far as I did, and the only reason I really wanted to try it because I owned it, and it's just not worth it. It's too huge to like waste my time on. And then the other one is Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister by Gregory Maguire. This would have been a reread. I had picked this for the BookTube Rereadathon 2019, hosted by Alex Black. I had picked this as my February read because I remember really loving this book when I read it over 10 years ago. It was early 2000s, and I at that time read a lot of Gregory Maguire's books, but lately I think he's just not the author for me. I tried to read this. I got about 20% of the way through, and that took me almost 3 weeks just to read that amount, which I don't know how many pages is that actually. It was about 100 pages. It took me like 3 weeks of just kind of picking it up at night before bed and not really interested in continuing to make it through that much. So this is a reread. Why should I keep trying it when I obviously have moved away from enjoying this author's style? Now onto the books I actually finished. And so we'll start with Changes in Latitudes by Jen Malone. This is a YA contemporary romance. I would definitely call it a contemporary romance because that is the main plot, is the romance. This is about a girl whose parents have recently divorced. What's her name? Cassie. And her mom feels like they need to kind of rebuild her, and the 2 kids need to kind of rebuild their family. So she decides to help ferry this sailboat from Washington State down to Mexico, and the kids would be with her, and they're in like there's 3 boats going together doing this trip, since the mother hasn't sailed since college. So she wanted some other boats to help her along. So in one of the other boats is a boy about her age named Jonah, who has spent most of his whole life sailing. And so Cassie is not experienced sailing, and he is. And so they're much different people, and so it's the romance that develops between the 2 of them. And there's also a lot of issues with Cassie and her mom, because she blames her mom for the divorce and for like kind of forcing her to give up her entire summer in the beginning of the school year to take this trip. And I ended up giving this 2.5 stars. I didn't expect it to be like mind-blowingly good or anything. I had read another one of Jen Malone's books, Wanderlust, and I really loved the romance in that one, so I thought that I would like this one, but the plot was just really boring. Like, it took me actually a long time to get through this, which a YA contemporary romance should not take very long. In my opinion, like, usually I can read them in a few days, where this one took several weeks, where I just kept putting it down because I just wasn't really getting into the story. I kind of hated the main character. I understand that she is jaded from the divorce and has a lot of like issues with her mom, but I just found her insufferable and just couldn't really stand her for very long at a time. And then I didn't really like the chemistry between the two, wasn't like amazing. Like I think in Wanderlost she did a really good job with the chemistry between those two, but this one is a little off. About the only thing I really enjoyed about this is that when they had like the first kiss scene, which I don't call that a spoiler because it's a romance, their first kiss scene was really well written. I thought she did an amazing job with that scene, but other than that, I just wasn't really invested. But there's nothing technically bad about this or wrong. That's why I gave it 2.5 instead of like 1 or 2, because it's fine. I just didn't really enjoy it that much. And then the next one is The Sweet Far Thing by Libba Bray. And this is the third and final book in the Gemma Doyle trilogy. This is a historical fiction, paranormal, kind of supernatural trilogy. And so this is all, the series is about this girl named Gemma Doyle who is at this boarding school and finds out that she kind of has powers and can go into this place called the Realms. And yeah, so there's a lot of magic involved and magical creatures and struggles with power play of the magic. There's people that want the magic from her, yada yada, all that. If you've been with my channel for very long, you know that I gave the first two both 3 stars. This one again was a 3-star. I don't think this is a bad trilogy, but I didn't find it anything amazing either. I do think, since this is one of Libba Bray's earlier books, this is her first trilogy, I would try The Diviners or whatever her more recent series is, because I felt like she had potential, but I didn't find this to be very spectacular. This book especially was way longer than it needed to be. It was over 800 pages, and there's not a problem with an 800-page book, especially in like a series, but this one just had way too much stuff that it was trying to say that didn't really need to be necessary. I thought that the last 100 pages were amazing, and if the whole book was condensed down to like kind of be similar to that last 100 pages, then it might have even gotten a 4 or 5 stars from me, because I really enjoyed that part. But the rest of the book just dragged and dragged, and we kept getting more new stuff and things happening. And I'm like, this is the end. Let's stop adding new things. Stop trying to make it a more rich world. We've already gone through 2 books. Let's just get to some really like climactic things happening in the third. So I just felt like she was trying to put too much into this. Maybe should have made this 4 books instead of 3, or just condensed it to more of the action and stuff really happening with the culmination of all the power plays. That would have been better. There's also a scene in here that I felt like was bad on the consent wise. It's not like a sexual scene, it's just a kissing scene, but still it was definitely not consensual if you ask me. And so that kind of bothered me a little bit with the romance. But like I said, 3-star series. I wouldn't necessarily tell you to go out and pick it up, but if you already own the books, I thought they were entertaining enough to read. And then the next one is another one that just kind of a middle of the road series for me, and that is Dark Triumph by Robin LaFevers. This is the second in the His Fair Assassin trilogy. I read the first one, Grave Mercy, a couple months ago. I've been buddy reading these with a group of friends, and if I wasn't buddy reading them, I probably wouldn't have continued the series, but I've been enjoying discussing them with my friends. So I did continue this because we were buddy reading. I don't know if I'm going to continue the series though, because they're just 3-star books for me. I gave 3 stars to Grave Mercy, and I gave 3 stars to this one. This is about a group of assassin nuns. So all of the books follow a different character, and they're all women who have joined this convent that are like daughters of the god of death, and then they are sent out to do his mission work of like killing the people that are marked for death. The first book, Grave Mercy, I really didn't like our main character Ismay that we are following, and that's why I had given it 3 stars, but I like the politics. Where this one, we're following a character that I was really intrigued by in the first one, and I did like really love her character, but there wasn't as much political stuff happening. So then it kind of like brought it down, because the problem with this one is that even though I love the main character and I loved the romance in this, if I could take our main characters and their like romance and put it in a different book, I would, because I just adored them as a couple and as individuals. They are great characters. But I had a lot of problem with this, and it's something that might have just been triggers for me, so other people might enjoy it more. but there is a lot of triggers in this for incest and like the constant threat of like rape and sexual assault from family members, and I just had a really hard time with that. And probably if I wasn't buddy reading, would have DNF'd it because it was something hard for me to read. It doesn't happen throughout the entire book necessarily, so I was able to kind of like move on from that and enjoy the relationship, but it was just kind of like constantly there as a threat in the background, and so that just really bothered me. But other people might not have as hard of a time with that as a trigger warning. It just is something that I don't like to read, and so I probably would not have continued this on my own. There's also a scene in this that I can't tell you about because it's towards the end, but that like I will have probably nightmares about for possibly the rest of my life. I don't know, like it was bad. It was something that I didn't know was coming and just really scarred me. So I had a really hard time thinking how to rate this because I loved the characters, but those things that were like triggering moments were really bad. So like if I was just going by the plot and those things, I probably would have only given this a 2 or maybe even 1.5, but because I love those characters, I decided to just give it a 3. Though I don't think I will be continuing the series unless my buddy read group decides that we as a whole group want to continue. And then next I have ones that I enjoyed a bit more than the 3-star books. And the next one is Grounded, The Adventures of Rapunzel by Megan Morrison. This is the first in a series. I don't know what the series is called as like a whole series, but they all take place in this fairy tale land called Time, and each of the books kind of follows a fairy tale we are familiar with but turns them on their head. So this one obviously follows Rapunzel, and then the next one follows Cinderella, and the third one is about the Frog Prince, I believe. And so this one, I was torn with this book because I really loved the second half of this. But the first half, I just wasn't really connecting with Rapunzel as a character. I wasn't really feeling like invested in the plot line, and it took me a long time to get into it. Like I would say the first half of this book maybe took me 2 weeks to read because I would only read like 1 chapter a day, and then the second half of the book I flew by in like a day and a half because I really started to like it a lot. So I ended up kind of settling that this is probably a 3.5 to 4-star book, but like the second half was probably a good 4.5 stars. It just was the first half didn't really grab me. But I will continue the series because part of the reasons that I wouldn't like this character, Rapunzel, is, you know, like everybody knows Rapunzel has been in a tower her whole life, and she's very sheltered and naive, and in this one she's definitely suffering from like Stockholm syndrome. Like she really still loves Witch, who has trapped her because that's the only mother she's ever known, and Witch always took care of her. And like everybody's trying to tell her Witch is a bad person, and Rapunzel's refusing to see that, and so it was like driving me nuts for the first half of the book. But you know, it's accurate to the character, so there's no reason for me to like judge the book based on that. So I do think it is like a 4-star book, and I do think it's worth reading, and I want to continue because I don't think I would have some of the same problems I had following like the character of Cinderella in the next one as I would with this, because they're different personalities. But I do like the way she turned the whole fairy tale on its head. Like the interpretation that she went with, I found really interesting. So I would recommend this series. It feels like a very underrated series because when you look it up, even though these have been out for a few years, they only have like 300 reviews or something like that. So it really is underrated, so I would highly recommend it. It reads more like middle grade, I would say, or like upper middle grade to lower teen. Not really heavy on the romance, more just like a fairy tale retelling with adventure story. And then the last one is another middle grade that I read, and it's Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. This was a reread for me. I loved this book when I was a preteen, like elementary school, because it basically is a story about puberty. And when I was a kid, I wanted to know what was coming. And so I read this over and over again. And I would say I gave it 4 stars, not because I think as an adult it is a 4-star book for an adult, but for the age demographic it is for, I think it still holds up as a good story. So when I say 4 stars, I wouldn't say that if you are adults listen to this, that you should go out and read this book necessarily, but if you have kids that are of that age, I do think it's still a good book for preteens to read. Because even though this was written like a long time ago, I can't remember, it definitely feels aged. This was written in 1970, it looks like, and things are much different. I still think a lot of the puberty stuff is still happening. Like, this covers buying her first bra, getting her first period, first boy-girl party, kind of the like way girls form groups and the way they treat each other when one develops more than the other. I think that stuff is still relevant to today, so I do think this would still be relevant for a preteen currently, and that's why I gave it 4 stars. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as something an adult would enjoy reading. I didn't like super enjoy it, but I did have like nostalgic feelings and would keep a copy of this for when my girls are in their preteens. And those are the books that I have either DNF'd or have read so far, basically so far in the month of May. If you've read any of these and want to chat with them, I'd love to hear down below. Thanks, bye.